destination network address translation. So in destination NAT, destination address is translated, either both destination IP and destination port or only destination IP address is translated, right? So for the lab demonstration, here like there is a FortiGate firewall and total 4 interfaces have been used. Port 2 LAN interface, port 3 WAN interface, and port 4 is DMG interface. So the very first time now I have introduced DMG zone or demilitarized zone, and in DMG zone there is one web server. Sample website is hosted on the server, already hosted, so we are not going to see like website hosting. For testing purpose, even if you are building your home lab, then you can have a Windows 7 or Windows 10 computer, and you can add internet information role, right? And once role or feature is enabled, then you will find a default web page. Okay, so for the lab demonstration, for testing purpose, even you can use the default page also. But here, like in my lab, in fact, there is a proper website hosted onto the server, DMG web server, and DMG web server IP address is 172.16.1.2, and gateway, of course, DMG interface IP. So DMG server already configured with IP, website is already hosted, FortiGate firewall interface is already configured, there is one default route here, right? But as so there is no destination NAT policy or security rule in fact created, and for testing purpose there is one computer, internal client, and connected to external network segment. So we will do the verification from here, right? So let us assume we want to use any IP address from the range, right, in the NAT. So maybe the next available IP address, that is 192.168.1.101, right? So internal client machine or test PC will open the browser and access website or web server, rather I would say, with external IP, NAT IP, not the real IP address, that is 102. In production network, you understand, like we always open website with the domain name, not straight away with the IP address. So we type domain name, and domain name is resolved to IP address with the DNS server, right? In the lab demonstration, straight away we can use IP address in the browser instead of domain name, right? We want to skip that portion, like name to IP translation, because you understand that, okay? Alright, so the first miss is like the request packet. Here's like FortiGate firewall, and the source IP, really we don't care. Source IP can be any IP address, but the destination IP address, NAT IP, right? Virtual IP, not the real IP address of the server, right? So request packet, source IP, any IP address coming from the external network, destination IP, virtual IP address, NAT IP address, or IP used in the NAT configuration. And if like traffic is allowed with the security policy, there is security policy, there is NAT policy, then what will happen? IP will be translated to the real server IP, and that is 172.16.1.2. means external IP is 192.168.1.102 and internal IP is 172.16.1.2. So once like NAT translation is successfully done, there is security policy that permit incoming HTTP request traffic. Then after the translation, request packet is forwarded or directed to the DMG web server. Then DMG web server will send response back to again FortiGate firewall, and FortiGate firewall will do the again mapping of IPs, because firewalls do maintain NAT table. This way internet client machine would see like reply packet coming with the same IP, right, from the same IP, not the real IP address, okay? And that's what even is expected behavior in the NAT translation. So for like NAT configuration, destination, and let me quickly show you like the configuration of FortiGate Firewall. What configuration FortiGate Firewall has? So FortiGate Firewall has like all the interfaces properly configured, DMG interface, IP address configured, LAN port, IP address is configured, management port, of course. I have access firewall with the management IP, WAN port, that is external interface IP. So all the 4 interfaces already configured with the IP. What about the route? So there is one static route here pointing towards the gateway IP address, right? So interface IP is configured, there is one route. What about security policy? So there is only one security policy here from LAN to internet, right? So straight away I'm going to create a firewall policy, and from there also like we can create virtual IP. Virtual IP is basically object, address object, wherein we define both external IP and internal IP, right? Mapping is done in this object, virtual IP object, right? So either just we can create virtual IP object upfront, and then using that virtual IP in the security policy, and even straight away we can go to security policy here, and we can create virtual IP object, right, at the time of creating firewall policy. Already we have discussed like this point in FortiGate Firewall. There are multiple ways of doing the same thing, right? Either this way, that way. Configuration should be done no matter like how you are doing that configuration. So this is from internet to DMG web server, right? Incoming traffic. So incoming interface coming from the WAN network site, outgoing interface DMZ, source address. Really we don't know the source address, so source address should always be all or any if really traffic is coming from the internet side. But here destination address, what about the destination address, right? So now create virtual IP or server object. Okay, so here like we have the option to create virtual IP address object, right? So in virtual IP server object we specify both internal and external IP, and the same object is used as the destination address, right? So again we are going to create NAT policy separately, right? In the virtual server itself NAT configuration is done, IPs are mapped like internal and external, and the object is used in the firewall security policy. Okay, so destination NAT configuration is a bit different here in FortiGate Firewall. If you compare with any other firewall, so really you will find this NAT configuration very different, right? Or destination NAT particularly. Alright, so create object, and I will name it DMG server or DMG virtual IP, right? You can just give any name, no issue. And interface not required, though external IP address, so there is only one IP address, and we decided to go with 102 IP and map to internal IP, web server IP, right? So it's mapping is done here, external IP and internal IP. Other configurations like yes can be done, but they all are optional. You can specify interface like external interface type is of course static NAT. We do have option here like FQDN, fully qualified domain name. So if we want to map with the FQDN, then yes, that is also possible, but there should be a proper DNS configuration to resolve like FQDN to corresponding IP address, and also port forwarding can be enabled. So we can specify external port and internal port number. So in case if request is hitting to port number maybe 80 or any other port, and internal web server is not listening on the same port, listening on different port, so we can do port forwarding or port mapping also, right? Optional filters also can be used here, so not required in this lab topology. So just external IP, internal IP, and we are good to go now. So select that object. So once object is created, use that object in the security policy. Schedule is always service. So really we are interested in HTTP and HTTPS, these two services, right? And NAT, do we have to enable NAT? Not exactly. NAT option is not required to be enabled, because if traffic coming from the internet client machine hitting like FortiGate Firewall, so in most of the cases, in most of the scenarios, we perform only destination NAT. Source NAT is not required here. So in production network, if like traffic coming with maybe source IP 45 dot in any IP address, for example 45.1.1.2, so after the translation, source IP remains same and destination is translated only, right? But in what scenario, in what situation source NAT is also configured, right, along with the destination NAT? So let us assume DMG web server is not configured with FortiGate Firewall IP as the gateway IP, right? Let us assume either there is no gateway address, or maybe gateway address is different. Different means like a router or any other device, right, pointing to maybe another firewall, a load balancer or something. So if there is no gateway IP, or gateway IP address is not the firewall interface IP address, so this may create asymmetric routing problem, right? Because request packet will get routed via firewall, but not the return traffic, not the reply traffic. So in order to resolve that issue, asymmetric routing issue, we can configure source NAT also. So what would happen then? Source IP address will be replaced or translated with firewall DMG interface IP address, right? And if source and destination IP both are from the same IP network, same subnet, then gateway is not required, right? So no matter what the gateway has been configured, there will be proper symmetric routing. So if that is the case, then yes, you can enable source NAT. Otherwise, no need to enable source NAT. So generally, this situation may arise if you are using a load balancer, application delivery controller, and there also like we get stuck like for like, because original IP address is lost at that time. So we do have some other options in the load balancer, and if you are familiar with the load balancer, then you must be aware with one of the HTTP attribute, very important, and that is known as X forwarded far. So we enable that option so that the original IP, client IP, is encoded inside HTTP header, right? So at the time of doing translation, original IP is lost from here, yes, for sure, but the original IP address is encoded inside HTTP header. There is one field added to this, and that field can be used for some other purposes, right? Let's not get into those stuff for now. But anyway, in this scenario, in this situation, source NAT need not to be enabled, so I'm going to turn it off. Source NAT not enabled, right? So we do not want source IP address to be translated. All good. So now firewall security policy is created. But as I said, like in certain scenarios, use cases, even source NAT is also enabled, right? And that is possible. We can enable both source and destination NAT, and even in the same packet also even if the traffic is not coming from the external network side, maybe some other issue, maybe in client machine is sitting in the same network, right here, and maybe in the same network segment, and we want like client machines should access DMG web server not with the real IP, with the same virtual IP address 192.168.1.102, kind of like U-turn NAT or one arm sniff, one arm mode. In fact, means request will hit the FortiGate firewall, and here like there should be proper NAT and security policy, and then again route will be routed back to the same network segment. But return traffic should again go through the firewall, right? To ensure that we enable both source NAT and destination NAT. So it's another use case, right? So there can be different scenarios wherein like we enable both source and destination NAT in the same flow. All right. So mainly to resolve asymmetric routing problem. So anywhere like if there is a routing issue, asymmetric routing, like request and request packet both are not taking the same path. Request packet is taking different path than the reply packet, then in order to resolve that, we enable sometimes source NAT, right? So both source and destination NAT. So let's do the verification now. So for verification purpose, we are going to access DMG web server with his NAT IP address, that is 192.168.1.102, right? And it's now successfully accessed. For further verification, we can check like hit count to the policy, and yes, good number of hits. And also we can do verification from forward traffic section, and look at the log message. So source IP address from the same range 192.168.1.100, source port, source interface, destination IP, NAT IP, right? Destination port and interface. So I hope you understand how to configure destination NAT in FortiGate Firewall. It's very straightforward. Simply just create a security policy with the object virtual IP, and in virtual IP object mention both like external IP and internal IP address, right?